So my client got her wig from TikTok shop, right? It came with really small knots. It was pre-plucked and the lace was very thin and nice. So it also had 3 clips in the front and 1 in the back and a band. So to get my wigs really flat, I cut all of this off. The only thing I use are the clips right here on the back. So I cut the 3 combs out and I cut the band out. But the 2 little adjustable straps, I leave those in and I use that to get my wig flat. So I'm going to go ahead with my razor and I'm going to cut those clips out, take that band out, and the only comb I'm going to leave is the one in the back. Be very careful when you're cutting these clips out so that you don't create a hole in the lace. And also I do this step with every single install to make sure my install is flat. Now I'm going to use some of my Got To Be Free spray and push the hair back. I'm using this not to push the hair into the lace, but to push the hair out of the way so that when I bleach the knots, I don't actually bleach the hair. Be very careful that you're not mushing it into the lace. You don't want it to lay down slick. You just want to get the flyaways out the way so that you can neatly apply the bleach. Also, you don't want to spray too much of this, just enough to get it all to go neatly back. And here's how it looks once I spray it all back, but I'm not smoothing it into the lace, making it flat. I'm just pushing it out of my way, so when I go in and bleach my knots, they bleach seamlessly without seeping through and getting on the hair. To bleach the knots, we're going to use BW2 bleaching powder and 40 volume developer. I go in with 1 big scoop of the powder and 1 cap full of the developer. Since this is a 13x6 lace, I went in and added just a little bit extra, but you don't always need to. Majority of the time, 1 scoop of bleach and 1 cap full of developer is just enough. While you're mixing it, you may get the urge to add more developer, but you don't need it. Just keep mixing and it will come together. The way I mix it is by stirring it in and then I scoop it around the bowl. Eventually it all comes together and it gets thicker and the developer absorbs into the bleaching powder. You want to keep doing this until it gets thick and creamy like a toothpaste. When you're done mixing it, you want the mixture to stick to the knife like it's glued to it. It shouldn't be runny, but it should be thick and stick to the knife. Whatever you're using to mix it, when you flip it upside down, it should not fall. If it does, just add a little bit of more powder, but if it doesn't fall, you have the right consistency. If it's too runny, add more powder and it will run through the wig and bleach the hair and not only knots. You don't want that. If it runs through the wig, it can bleach the hair and cause it to shed earlier than it should. This also creates bald spots. To avoid that, make sure you have a mixture that sits on the lace but not runs through the lace and sticks to the knife. Now I'm holding the hair with my leg and I'm stretching out the lace with my hands. I'm using the same knife to spread the bleach inside of the wig. You want to make sure you only get bleach on the knots and not on the hair. You want to stretch the lace out and kind of scrape the lace. My goal for my clients is to be able to reuse these wigs, so I do not bleach the entire inside of the wig. I only bleach enough for the middle part, so I will bleach the part in the middle all the way down to the back of the wig. I also bleach where the baby hairs will be placed and a little bit behind that where I'll be plucking at. Anything that will be parted and seen is where I would bleach the knots. I would do maybe half of this frontal and the entire middle part since I already know the style that we're doing. If I were doing a side part, I would bleach a little more further down on the side where the client gets the part at. This is why it's very important to know what style your client is getting when they come. To be on the safe side, I always do the entire middle part and a little bit further down on the sides just in case they change the style, but I do not bleach the back of the wig. Since I know my client would like to use this wig again whenever she comes back, as I cut into the wig, if I need to bleach the knots, I will go in again and bleach what wasn't bleached. This prevents the hair from shedding too much because bleaching the knots weakens them and causes them to come out easier. This also helps to prevent over bleaching. After applying the bleach, I'm going to gently pull the hair out of the bleach just to make sure I didn't mush any of the hair into the lace, which can bleach the actual hair and not only the knots. I'll let the bleach sit anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes, but make sure you monitor your knots every 7 to 8 minutes. So it's very important to have your clients to drop their units off before they install, but for video purposes, we're going to do everything same day. That way I can teach everything. So now we're going to get into the braid down. For the braid down, my first braid is going to go straight back, and then we're going to take it around the nape of the neck. This braid will be our anchor braid. So I sew all of my wigs down, so this braid will be the braid that we sew onto. Also, by doing this, you also want to make sure that you're pulling out the little hairs in the back. That way you're not creating tension on the back of the neck, but by doing so, making our anchor braid, this gives the wig stability and something to sit on rather than just flapping around in the back. My client is fully natural with thick hair and thick roots, so I'm going in with my Andes hot comb and I'm going to straighten out her roots. This is going to give us a super flat install, and this is also going to give us a braid down that lasts for more than one install. This is a returning client, but I do this with every single client, especially if they have thick roots. The reason being is that you don't want a bulky braid down underneath your install. This is going to work against your wig. I'm not necessarily focused on hot combing the whole entire head from roots to ends. I'm more focused on just the roots. This is going to give me a good grip on the hair, and it'll allow my braid to be as flat as possible. When her hair does start to grow out, it will not be a messy braid down, so we can still reuse these braids. For those clients that have super thick hair, when you do this step, you'll realize you don't even have to do as many braids. As I stated before, the first braid is the anchor braid. So I start braiding from the right side of the head, and I take my braid all the way past the ear and down to the left side of the head. This is the only braid that will go like this. All other braids will go straight back and we'll connect them in the back. The second braid I do is going to go straight back. There's nothing really too special about this braid. Just keep in mind that I'm still using my Andes hot comb to hot comb the roots of her hair, and I'm braiding this braid straight back. I don't have a specific amount of braids I do. I don't do 8 to 10. I do however many it takes to get the install flat. I part my braids about an inch apart, and I make sure I hot comb them every single time so that my braid is as flat as it can possibly be. My third braid is going to be the braid that we're going to connect to the first braid. So when you connect your braids, you always want to connect them behind the ear. You never want to connect them further than the ear because you want the bulkiness to be more at the back than the front. You don't necessarily want it to be bulky, but you want it to be a firm foundation for you to sew the wig on. If you struggle with picking up the braids, flip them before you start the next braid, and you can either pin it or just leave it there and pick it up as you go. Even if the client has super long hair, you still want to flip and connect the braids as you come down behind the ear. You do not want a bulky top, and you want a super flat install, especially if you're doing a middle part or any styling up top. Do not wait until you get to the very end of the braid to connect the braids in the back. This will give you a super uneven and bulky foundation. The only way you can connect the braids in the back is if the client has super thin or really short hair. Otherwise, flip them and connect them behind the ear. When you flip the braids up to connect them, be very firm, but do not pull too tight. You can pull it firm and loosen up as you braid it down. I usually start braiding from left to right, but once I get near the middle, I turn the client back to the front and I split the hair down the middle, and I do little braids in between. The reason I do this is to get a flat and even foundation on both sides. I do this whether I'm doing a middle or a side part because you know the top of the head is usually your highest point. So if your middle braids are big, then your install is going to be big, and there's no way around that. Once I get to about the last 2 to 3 braids, we stop flipping the braids because we don't want it to be bulky on the sides. We don't want to look in front of a person and see their wig sticking out on the side. So these braids are going to go straight back. The only braid that I'm going to pull up is our anchor braid, which is that end braid. I'm going to pull that up into the braid I do, and then the rest are going to go straight back. And once we're done and get to the last 2 to 3 braids, we're going to just braid them all together straight back and sew them across and tuck them in a space in between the anchor braid and the braids that we flipped up. If you have a client with super long hair, you're going to have to sew it twice. So what you'll do is sew it how I sew it this time, and then flip it back coming the other way and sew through the braids as well. Be careful not to sew too tight because this will cause unnecessary tension in the back of the head and can lead to hair loss. This will also make the install super uncomfortable. So first things first, I want to make my knot. I'm going to go underneath the braid on the bottom and through the braid on the top. I'm going to pull it all the way to the end. I'm going to go do the same thing again, and I'm going to wrap the thread around the needle twice. This is going to get me my first knot. Then I'm going to do the same steps twice until I get to the end of the braid. You don't want to sew it too close together because that's unnecessary tension, and you also remember, do not want to do it too tight. At the end, I'm going to pull it a little tight, but I promise you it's not that tight. I'm just making it firm so I can get a secure knot. After I'm done sewing down, I'm going to go ahead and moisturize my client's scalp. Now, I prefer to use scalp balm by Just For Me. However, a lot of people use oil. The reason I do not use oil because oil is super runny and it will eventually run down. But scalp balm actually sits in place and moisturizes my client's scalp. It also doesn't have super harsh ingredients. It's pretty natural. It smells good and my clients love it. And it also grows their hair. Another option for hair growth underneath your wig installs is hair fertilizer as well. I'm using a mini makeup brush to spread the oil just for sanitation, but I'll use my fingers with gloves as well. Now we're going to get into rinsing the bleach out, guys. How long the bleach sits on your wig all depends on the type of wig that you have. This specific wig, I let the bleach sit on the knots for about 20 to 25 minutes. Once I rinse the bleach out, I'm going to go ahead and tone it with my blue shampoo. I do not use purple shampoo because purple shampoo cancels out yellow. This blue shampoo cancels out brassiness. Usually when wigs are bleached, they turn a brassy color, so we're going to tone it down. You don't want the toner to sit too long. You want your knots to still be 3 to 5 shades lighter than your client. I'm going to put the toner on and I'm going to let it lather, and then I'm going to let it sit for about 5 minutes, and I'm going to check it to make sure it doesn't get too dark. If you let the blue shampoo sit on the knots for too long, it'll look like you didn't even bleach the knots, so be very careful when toning. To prep my client for the ball cap, we're going to go in with the yellow Got To Be Spiky glue. If you have clients with super fine hair, you can use the black Got To Be gel. I'm going to smear this around her entire hairline. I'm also going to go back on top of it with some of the even black spray. If I don't have the even black spray, then I will use the red one, but I never use the yellow one on top of this because it doesn't work as well. Always make sure whenever you spray any product around your client's face, you cover their eyes so that the product does not get in their eyes. Anytime I'm using any sprays around my clients, I typically spray from a distance just to avoid product overload on the client's hair. Whenever I'm working with product that I know is going to be sticky or messy, I always use nitro examination gloves. I don't use any other material but nitro. Next thing you're going to do is you're going to take a slightly coarse baby hair brush and you're going to push her entire hairline back. You want to make sure everything is going back and nothing is swooped or curved. The only thing that you can push upward is the sideburns. Otherwise, everything goes straight back. This is how you get an accurate depiction of your client's hairline, and this is going to help you set the foundation. Also, if you have clients with super low hairlines, you can use this method and glue the cap exactly the way you slicked it back to get an accurate depiction of their hairline. After I slick everything back, I'm going to go in and blow dry it on medium heat but high speed. Do not constantly rub your hand into the product that you use to slick the hair back. Once you rub it, hold it at the beginning of the braid so that it stays in place and blow dry it on medium heat and high speed. The caps I use are from Dreamworld. I've tried to find these caps online multiple times, but I could never find them. However, I will be providing you guys with the contact information for the vendor of these caps. I do not use polyester. If you cannot get these specific caps, just make sure you're using a super thin cap that is made with nylon fabric. First thing I do is I place the cap firmly over my client's head. Also, once I place it, I stretch it down again to make sure I can see their hairline super clearly. You want your cap to already be seamless and see-through before you even place the product on it to melt it. I make sure my client holds and stretches the cap out as much as they possibly can. I'm going in with my black even adhesive spray. Once again, if I don't have the black one, I would use the red one, but I never use the yellow one to melt. Since we use even underneath to slit the product back, this even is going to activate the one that's underneath and it's going to help it stick and melt as seamlessly as possible. I spray a little bit on the cap and then I use my finger to outline the client's hairline. I make sure I tilt their head as I need, that way the product doesn't run down, and then I stop my cap right above the ear. You do not want your cap to go all the way down to the sideburns because the lace goes in front of the cap. So if the cap goes too far, the lace is going to go even further. Once I have my cap on how I like it, the first thing I do is I take my blow dryer and I blow dry it on medium heat and high speed. I start off with the ears, making sure the ears are slicked down, and then I go into the rest of the hairline. Since the client is stretching it out, it's going to dry pretty quickly. Once I'm done on heat, I'm going to switch my blow dryer to cool, and I'm actually going to press my blow dryer into the cap. When you blow dry it on heat, it actually dries it, but when you go in with the cool air after blow drying it, it seals it. This way, when I go to apply product on top of the cap, it does not slide back. I actually place the cool air directly on the hair so that it completely seals my cap. If you have a client with a really low hairline and a small forehead, you do not have to mold the cap down where it's closest to the eyebrows, because remember, the lace is going to go in front of the cap. So if the cap is too far down, the lace is going to be nearly on the eyebrows. Once you go in and apply the lace, you can actually apply the lace directly on that piece of hair that was left out. Don't worry, this will not remove their edges as long as they take off their wig the proper way. Remember guys, we start off with heat and then we go in with cool air directly on the cap to seal it. Once the cap is done drying while the client is still holding it, we're going to go ahead and sew down this cap using our anchor braid. So once again, you start behind the ears always. I'm going to make my knot and I'm going to go across to the other side of the head, sewing the cap down entirely. You don't want to sew them down too close together because that creates unnecessary tension. You just don't want the cap to move when you cut it off. If the cap moves, eventually the lace will move. So this step is very important. Do not skip it. Notice how wide the gaps are as I'm sewing down to the other side. Once I get to the other side, I'm going to stop behind the ear again. But once again, you do not want to sew too close together because it will create unnecessary tension. The main reason for this is for the cap to stay on the entire time that the install stays on. Also, this gives you that snatch look. Once I get behind the ear to the very end, I'm going to seal it by making a knot twice and I'm going to cut my thread. While the client is still holding the cap, I'm going to go in with my Ruby Kisses cream foundation and I'm using the shade 15. I usually always use the same exact shade of their skin tone or a shade darker. It all depends on the color of the cap. If I have a cap that is super light, then I would go in with the shade darker. I do not rub my makeup brush inside the foundation really hard. I'm actually very light-handed. This way I'm able to control the color that I get. The harder you rub the makeup brush into the foundation, the darker the color will be. So be very careful when doing this step. If you want to, you can rub a little bit of the foundation on the back of the cap and then bring it down once you get the color that you want. Also, make sure you're rubbing the foundation not only on the hairline but in the back as well where the part will show. This will be another way to help you conceal your knots and give you a scalp look underneath the lace. When we cut the cap, we start by cutting it straight down the middle with some scissors, and then we're going to finish cutting it with a razor. I use a razor for more precision and for a cleaner cut when it comes to the cap. You want to make sure your razor is behind the cap and you're pulling the cap upward toward the blade. This way you get a clean cut and you don't cut your client. You can cut the cap with two ways. You can either place it along the skin and peel the cap upward toward the razor. You can use the razor how it's normally used by shaving it downward. Whichever way you decide to use the razor when cutting the cap, make sure that you're putting the cap upward towards the razor. Once we're done cutting the cap on this side with the razor, remember I said we're going to cut it very neatly, so I'm going to take my scissors and go all the way to the other side, stopping behind the ear, and then we're going to continue to cut the cap with the razor. The reason we cut this cap very neatly is because we're going to go in and use it again to help us melt the lace towards the end of the install. Because we're cutting the cap while it's on her head, it's actually going to fit her head perfectly when we go in and use it at the end. Remember guys, make sure you're pulling the cap upward toward the blade on the razor and not pushing the razor downward towards their skin. If you do so, you will cut your client by mistake. I use a new razor for every single client because I buy my razors in bulk. Keeping use of a fresh razor keeps it sharp and also makes sure cap melt more seamlessly when you cut it. If you use an old razor or a razor that's getting dull, it will be much harder for you to cut the cap. It'll also make your cap ripple up and scrunch up, which will work against you when you go to install the lace. After you cut your cap, we're going to go in with our Got To Be Free spray. Spray some on our finger and we're going to apply it to the cap. I spray it lightly on my finger, not too much because you do not want to saturate it. It will cause the cap to roll back if the cap isn't fully dry. As soon as I place that Got To Be on the hairline, I immediately have my blow dryer on medium heat and high speed right behind it. It helps to have your blow dryer already ready to hit that cap as soon as you place the got to be on the cap. That way you don't have to deal with the cap rolling back. If you don't want to use got to be, you can also use the black even spray for this step, but be very careful because it's super sticky. This step helps lay the cap down seamlessly. Sometimes when you cut your cap off, you'll notice little pieces of the cap that didn't lay all the way down and they're just too small to cut. So I just go in and lay it down with my got to be. My cap is melted, but it's also still slightly visible. This is okay. I want my cap to be slightly visible underneath the lace. That way I can use the cap as a guideline to where to place the lace. I'm going to go in one more time with my got to be just to make sure everything is laid down. That way when I go to apply my glue, the glue does not lift any pieces of the cap up. You want to make sure every single piece of the cap is down, because if not, when you go and apply that glue, your cap is going to start rolling back against the pieces that were left up. I added just a little bit of makeup over the parts where I applied the got to be just to get a more melted effect underneath the lace, and then I went in with my 70% alcohol and I cleaned my client's skin. If I don't use 70% alcohol, then I will use Sea Breeze, which is an astringent for sensitive skin and oily skin. So I let the blue shampoo sit on my knots for about 10 to 15 minutes, but this time varies. Remember, you always want your knots to be 3 to 5 shades lighter than your client. The blue shampoo did its job and toned my knots really well, and here I am just rinsing it out with some warm water and checking them on my hand to make sure they're a good color. As I'm rinsing out the frontal, I'm making sure that I do not wet the entire wig. This is super time consuming, especially if you're doing same day customizing. The only time I will wash the entire wig is if it has a bad smell or if the client requests me to do so. I do a quick knot test on my hands, checking to see that all the black dots are gone, and look at how seamless this looks. It automatically looks like scalp on my hand, so it's going to look even more amazing on my client. Once I'm finished rinsing the wig out, I put the wig into my stand-up blow dryer and I let it dry on heat until it's completely dry, and then I'm going to get into plucking. I get this from Amazon. It's really good and it comes with warranty and it lasts super long. Once my wig is completely dry, I'm going to go in with my heat protectant and my Andes hot comb to push the hairline back. This will create a clean foundation on the lace before you start customizing, and it will also help you avoid over plucking. You cannot pluck what you can't see, so if you skip this step, you are likely to over or under pluck. This is a very important step. You want to make sure you're using the back of your Andes hot comb. I go in with the teeth of the comb, but the back of the hot comb actually gets hotter than the rest of the comb. I'm pulling the hair up and I'm pushing my hot comb into it. That way I can get it to lay flat and I can see the true shape of the hairline. Now guys, we're gonna get into plucking. So before I start plucking and doing anything further, I'm gonna make sure this wig fits my client's head. I'm gonna see how it fits the head, and I'm gonna start my plucking based off of how it fits on the head. So you'll see me put those two little clips on in the back. I'm gonna properly fit the wig on the head, and then I'm gonna begin customizing according to her head size. Once I put my wig on my client, the first thing I'm going to do is split the wig down the middle. Because we're doing a widow's peak, you want to have an accurate middle part according to your client's head shape. That way when you put the wig back on the client, your widow's peak is centered in the middle and not on the side. If you skip this step, you may have to go in and recustomize the entire hairline because a widow's peak pulls forward. So if you pull the wrong part forward, you will have to go back in and pull everything backward. That way you have some type of peak in the wig. Once I place the wig on, I'm going to put the wig on like it already has lace glue on already. I want this wig to be fitting as accurate as it would as if I was gluing down. That way once I customize it and put it back on, I have everything customized in place as it was on the head. Once I get it where I want it to go, I'm going to have my client hold it down. That way I can get a perfect middle part. This is basically like a mock-up for your install. You want to do every single step super accurate to make sure you have a flawless install, especially if you're doing a widow's peak. And once I have the wig where I want it to be, this is when I'm going to go ahead and start doing my part. So just pretend this wig is glued down. I'm going to do my part like it's already glued down. I'm going to use my luster slick stick to go ahead and do my middle part. When you purchase this course, it came with a page that contains a link to my Amazon storefront. In my Amazon storefront, there are all or majority of the products that we use today in this install. You can purchase this slick stick from my Amazon storefront, or you can go to your local beauty supply store. It's made by Lusters. The way I use this wax stick is just like how braiders use gel when they're parting out their parts for the braids. I use it to get a super defined and accurate part in the middle. Using the end of my rat tail comb, I'm going to go in with the center of her head. My guideline for my middle parts is in between the nose and the eyes. Once the comb aligns with those 2 points on the face, I know that my part is in the center, so I'm going to drag my comb up and through the wig to get that middle part in the wig. Now, since we're doing a widow's peak, notice that when I put the wig on her head, I pulled the top slightly forward. We're not doing a deep widow's peak, we're doing a subtle widow's peak. This is suitable for most clients who are afraid to try widow's peak, or for clients who like widow's peak but not too peaky. As we're hot combing, you can kind of see that the lace kind of already looks plucked. This is because it's a pre-plucked hairline. Whenever you're purchasing hair from any vendors, or just as a recommendation to your clients, always ask your clients for pre-plucked small knots and transparent lace. You want your lace to be thin and transparent or HD. Anything other than that is going to take a miracle to work. Trust me, it's possible, but it's more work and it's more difficult. Also, thin laces last much longer on an install than a thick and a white lace will. You want to make sure your client is purchasing quality hair, but also give them knowledge on how to purchase quality hair and what to look for. It does not matter how long it takes you to part in the middle. You want your middle part to be perfect, so part and go in and do it as many times as it takes, because you cannot get away with the part that's not in the middle or a crooked part. Once you part it down the middle, you want to reverse check it. So start making sure your client head is straight up and then come back down from the top of the wig. You want to do this a few times to make sure your comb is landing in the center of the face every time. This is how you know your part is in the middle. Once you have your middle part, we're going to go in and shape her hairline. Basically, we're going to go in and go to where her temples are, and we're going to curve the hairline around that and pull that hair out to mimic her hairline. This is why you want to keep the cap a little light, that way you can see while you do this. Your cap is going to be your guideline as to how much hair you need to pull out. Doing this step will give you a super realistic hairline, but it will also allow you to imitate your client's hairline to the T. This is what gives me that natural look every time, especially when I do side parts. No one's hairline is straight across. Underneath your temples usually go back further than your temples do, so you want to make sure you're pulling that out. Then we're going to go to the middle and we're going to start creating our V. We're going to pull it out, but we're not going to go all the way down to the temple. You want the temple to still stay where it's at. You're going to make a slight V and imitate the entire hairline. Pull out all of your hair, and then we're going to remove the wig and customize it on the dome head. Do not try to make your widow's peak too sharp when you're pulling it out, because we're going to go in and pluck that. Also, we're doing a natural widow's peak look, so it's really subtle and not sharp. My client does not like that look, so we're not going to do that look just yet. I'm going to go in and pull the front of the lace down just to check my widow's peak to make sure I like how it looks. Always test it while you pull it out to see how it's going to look exactly on the client's head. That way, once you put it on after you customize it, there are no mishaps. After I part out my widow's peak, I just take my time, go back in and perfect it. You want to make sure that your client is still holding on to it as tight as they possibly can. That way you can have a really accurate depiction of their hairline. Guys, do not be afraid to ask your client to help you throughout the install. Holding a lace and holding a cap, guys, is really not that hard, and also it'll give them the best results if they help you. Don't be afraid. It's necessary to get a flawless install because you can't do it on your own. I take my time imitating the hairline. I go in and now I switch from side to side to make sure it's even on both sides. But my main thing is making sure I'm using my cap underneath the lace as a guideline, since the cap is placed directly on her hairline. This will give us the most accurate depiction of her hairline. After I went in and out making sure I got the perfect hairline, I'm going to go in and take the hair piece by piece while the client is still holding on to it, and I'm just going to pull it out. If you don't want to pull it out, you can always pluck it out, but I just find this way easier and more convenient. I can also control the hairline as I go. You want to make sure you're grabbing it in little pieces, that way you don't rip the lace, and make sure you are pulling everything out. To check my widow's peak, I just stretch the lace forward where I would want to apply it with glue, and I just see if I like it. Once I'm satisfied, then I move on to the next side and I begin pulling out the side underneath the temple to imitate her hairline. After we have everything out, we're going to take this wig off of her head and we're going to put it on a dome head to go in and customize it. Remember, I told you guys, we don't want to do the widow's peak sharp. Right now, how it looks is fine because we can always go in and sharpen it up, but it's all client preference. Before you remove the wig off of your client's head and place it on a dome head, make sure you recheck the hairline for accuracy. This will be the time where you will go in and fix anything that you messed up or go in and part out even more. Once I check my widow's peak and my hairline, my temples, I'll go ahead and remove the wig off and put it on the dome head. I go in and part out at least ½ an inch behind the hairline. I'll make sure I'm pulling out what's pre-plucked and a little hair behind that. And I'm going to pluck going from the back to the front. You never want to pluck front to back because you won't be able to see exactly what you're plucking. You can pluck your wig wet or you can pluck it dry. I prefer to pluck dry for beginners because it helps you avoid over plucking. If you pluck wet, the knots easily slide out and it's super easy to over pluck. So I would pluck dry to be on the safe side. The brand of tweezers I'm using in this video are from Touch of Belle, which is a friend of mine who sells beauty products. However, if I don't have these, my go-to is Tweezerman tweezers. You can get this from CVS, Walgreens, or on Amazon. Everything I use will be linked in my Amazon cart. The reason I love Tweezerman tweezers is because they do not go dull easy at all, and they also do a very good job at plucking. If you want to pluck well, you need to make sure you have some fresh new tweezers that are not dull and not cheap. I do not use beauty supply tweezers because they dull pretty fast and they pull out way too much hair. If you struggle with plucking, 9 times out of 10 it may be your tweezers. So I would invest in a really good sharp pair of tweezers that do not go dull fast and have a pointed end. Once I pluck behind the hair I pull out, I go in again and I part out enough hair in the front so that I can see what I plucked behind it. As you pluck coming forward, you do not want to pull out a lot of hair. You want to do a really thin layer in the front. That way you can see exactly what you need to pluck behind it. When I pluck, I try not to stay in one spot for too long. I just want to make sure I can see what I pluck behind it. As you pluck coming forward, you'll notice you don't have to pluck as much. You're basically filling in the dots. I try to pluck in one spot maybe about once or twice and then move forward, because if you stay in one spot, you're going to end up over plucking. Since we're more in the back of the wig, you can pluck a little more just so that you can get a super thin and natural install. The more natural you want to install, the more you'll have to pluck. To avoid over plucking, make sure you're not creating huge gaps in between the layers that you're pulling out to pluck. For example, you see how I have the hair in the front? I don't want to make a super thick space in between what's being plucked and what's not plucked yet. This will give you a really over plucked look, and it'll also cause your lace to shed prematurely. How much hair you pluck really all depends on your client's preference and the type of install you're going for. When I have clients that want installs with no baby hairs, I actually go in a little deeper and I pluck a little more. But to avoid over plucking, you just want to make sure you're filling in those gaps and you're taking your time with it. I'm not staying in one spot more than twice, 3 max. Even if you don't pull out the hair that you want, just move on, because if you stay in one spot, eventually you'll end up creating a hole in a space in the lace. And you do not want that, because once the hair is gone, the only way to put it back is to ventilate it, and that's very time consuming. While you're plucking the hair, you want to make sure you're pulling the hair as well. This way you can see exactly what you pluck when you pluck it. Once we get to that last layer, we're not going to part it out. We're actually going to just push everything back and we're going to go in and define it more. So I flip my tweezer to the sharpest side, not the side that we pluck with, but the sharp side. The sharp side, and I'm just going to go in and make some indentations. Notice how my hairline is going to the side because we're on the sides of the head. You don't want to push it directly back. You want to kind of lean it to the side. That way you can see exactly how it's going to lay. Remember guys, make sure you're pulling as you're plucking. If you just pluck without holding the hair, when you pluck, the hair is not going to come out and you're going to think it's still there. So you're going to stay in that one spot. But by the time you go in and comb everything out, you'll notice that you over pluck. So make sure you have a firm grip on the hair as you're plucking. Once again, I'm just going in space by space and just pulling out extra hairs to give it a more natural look and to break up that harsh hairline. I really want you guys to pay attention to exactly what I'm doing. That way you can get the most effective results when you're plucking. Plucking usually is overthought, which is why so many people struggle with it. But I promise you guys, it's really not that difficult. Just don't overthink it. When you're plucking guys, make sure you're actually pulling out the knots and not just dragging the tweezers alongside the wig. Once you're done with your last step, you're going to apply some pressure and heat with the hot comb and push your entire hairline back. Now we're going to go ahead and get into plucking our widow's peak. So when we do the widow's peak, we're going to pull it over to the side before we sharpen it up. I'm going to start at the tip of the widow's peak and I'm going to go down, but I'm going in an angle. However you pull the widow's peak is how it's going to lay on the client. So make sure you're pulling it over to the side. Even though I'm making the widow's peak slightly sharper, I'm still not going to define it as much as I want to until it's on the actual head. This way, if I need to adjust, I'm able to without missing any hair from one side. You want to make sure you have a clean curve, a clean C shape and no hair interrupting. You can use the ends of the tweezer to define it and see how it'll look once it's flipped over. But basically, you're just going to clean it up and make sure it all flows together with the rest of the hairline. Once again guys, when we part out the hair to pluck, we're not going to part out any hair in the widow's peak. We're going to start at the end of the widow's peak and go all the way down. I go in about 1/2 inch, but if you want a more natural hairline, you can go in and pluck just a little deeper. I want you guys to just pay close attention to the video, to how I pluck, how much I part out, and where I'm plucking at. Remember guys, when you're plucking, you want to make sure you're pulling the hair back. You want the hair to be going backwards, and you want to be applying some pressure on it so that as soon as you pluck, the hair comes out. If you just freely pluck without putting pressure on the hair, you're going to pluck too much and you're not going to know exactly what you pluck. By me pulling the hair back, as soon as the knot comes out, I'm able to see exactly where I plucked at. The whole entire purpose of plucking is to thin the hairline out to give it a more natural look. Once again, plucking is preference. You pluck how much you like and how much you want, depending on how natural you want the hairline to look. When I pluck, I usually pluck once or twice in the same spot and then I move forward. The only time I pull a third time is if I really can't get the knot, but you don't want to go any further than twice if you don't have to. Even if I'm not satisfied with what I see in the moment, I still do not stay in that one spot because I'll get too hyper focused on it and then end up plucking it way too much. Just move forward even if you're not ready yet, because eventually you'll come back down into it. When you pluck, you usually cross check, so you go back and forth with plucking. This is why it's important to not stay in one spot for too long. Once you get to the very end of the rows that you pull out, like that last row, you only want to pull out enough for edges and pluck whatever is behind it. The reason you're going to do this is because if you don't pull out enough for edges, when you go to do baby hairs, you're going to have really thin and patchy baby hairs. So I'll pull out enough that I'll use for baby hairs and I pluck whatever else is behind that. Comes to defining the widow's peak, I don't do too much until I actually have it on the head. I do pre-pluck a little bit, I define it some more, but I always finish my widow's peak once it's actually on the client. The reason I do this is because I want the widow's peak to fit the client and be as natural looking as possible. So I'm going to go in and define it just a little bit more so that I'm not plucking entirely on the client's head. But once we apply that lace, I'll construct it more to fit my client. Be careful not to overpluck your widow's peak because you don't want to apply the lace and realize that your widow's peak is too thin, because when you go and part it, you'll have a widow's peak on one side but the other side will be receding. And once we're finally done plucking that last row, we're just going to go in and break up the hairline just a little bit to give it more of a natural look. You're not necessarily plucking this with the same side you pluck the rest of the wig on. You actually flip the tweezers over and use the sharper side. And then we're going to go in and define our widow's peak just a little bit, pluck a little bit where it's thick at, and I'm just going to do that until I achieve my desired look. Careful when you do this step because you do not want to pluck too much. You just want to break up the hairline. If you do pluck too much, you will risk plucking where your baby hair should go. You do not want thin, spaced out baby hairs, so do not pluck any more than you see me plucking. To go ahead and check my widow's peak, I'm just going to pinch it outward. That way I can see exactly how it's going to lay. Since when we do the widow's peak, it's going to lay to the side, I'm just going to check it with my tweezers, or you can use a comb to do this step. But I'm basically just checking it to see if there's any hair interfering with the way it lays. Since we're doing a natural widow's peak, we do not want it to be too deep. However, if you want to do a super broad and sharp widow's peak, this is where you will go in and curve it out a little bit more and pluck it to make it sharp. But be very careful, like I stated before. I am a bit of a perfectionist, so I do things until I feel like they are even on both sides and until I like what I see. I use my hot comb to push the hairline back to check it, and then I realize that it's too thick, so I just go in behind the widow's peak and pluck a little more so that way it lays flat and still gives me a natural look. I'm very careful when I'm parting out this hair. I do not want to part out too much and pluck too deep into the widow's peak, but I want to part out just enough so that when I place that thin layer back, I can see what I pluck behind it, as you see now. Don't only listen to what I say, but actually pay attention to the video and replay it as many times as you need to so that you can understand the concept of plucking and how to pluck the correct way. And remember, check your hairline with your hot comb always. To make sure our widow's peak is directly in the center, we're going to take our Ruby Kisses cream foundation in a shade lighter, or if you have a light client, a shade darker than the client. I'm going to make the perfect middle part using just the guidelines of her face. Because we already had the client hold the wig, we did the parting on the wig and we made sure the wig fit her head perfectly. Once we lay it and align it with this same point on the face, it's going to be directly in the middle. This is why what I tell you, whenever you're having your client hold the wig and you're doing the part in the middle, make sure that the client is holding it tight, because this is the same way we're going to apply the lace. If you do this, you will get the perfect widow's peak every single time. To match the lace to my client's skin tone, we're going to use tint instead of makeup, because the tint actually stains the lace to give it color while the makeup just sits on top. That creates a barrier between the lace and the glue, so it won't melt properly or last as long. Also, tint is very buildable, so you're not going to get the perfect shade the first time, which is fine. You can always go in and bring it up to the color that you want it to be. Today we're going to be using the shade medium brown. The tint I get is from Red by Kiss. You can find it at any beauty supply store, and you can also get it from Amazon. I get this tint in every single shade that they make, and also I only apply the tint underneath the lace and not on top. To be on the safe side, spray the tint from a distance, because the closer you spray, the darker it'll come. But if you spray it from a distance, it'll be lighter and much easier to build up. The tint is also self-drying, but I still go in and dry it just to be on the safe side. Once I tint my lace, I just put it back on my client's head to check it and test to see if I like the color. Now, like I said, you don't need to add any makeup underneath the lace, but if you get close but not perfect, you can always go in with your client's skin tone and add makeup on top. But never, ever, ever apply makeup underneath the lace, because it will prevent the lace from sticking. Once I'm satisfied with the colored tint I see on the head, I go ahead and I position the wig to lay exactly how I want it to go. Again, we're going to have our client lean up towards us and hold the lace down so that we can get it to fit perfectly. I'm also making sure that I use that line that I drew with the makeup as my guideline for my widow's peak. You want to make sure the widow's peak is centered directly in that line. That way you have the perfect widow's peak every time. And you also want to check it before anything. You want to make sure your wig fit before you apply any adhesive. This will help you get a long-lasting install, because if the wig stays in place without glue, then you know it's going to last just as long as you need to. This is a very important step. Please do not skip this step, and make sure you have your wig exactly where you want it to lay. Also guys, when you're color matching using the tint, you can tint it anywhere from 1 to 3 times. But if you're not getting your exact shade after that, wait till the end of the install and use makeup on top, but never makeup underneath the lace. Remember guys, tint goes inside the lace, makeup goes on top of the lace. Before we glue anything down, I'm just going to make sure my widow's peak is going directly in the center of that line that we drew. I'm going to adjust and readjust as I need to, just to make sure the wig is also laying on the head how I want it to. After I have everything adjusted where I want it to lay, I'm going to peel my wig back. Make sure you're not pushing the wig back, but actually peeling it back. That way when you bring it back forward, it still lays in the same spot. I'm also going to define my part before I move forward. That way I know that my middle part is directly in the middle. To lay my lace, I use two different lace adhesives. I use Even Glue, the yellow version, and I also use Erica J Hold Me Down glue. Now I'm going to use the Even Glue for a majority of the install, and I'm going to do about 3 to 4 layers of the Even Glue. Anything that does not stick, I go in with my Erica J glue, which has a really stronger hold, and I use that to lay everything else down. Now the Even Glue is a type of glue where even when it turns clear, it's still not dry. This allows you some time to spread the glue out. I think this glue is very beginner friendly, and it also dries with the light. Now Erica J glue dries pretty fast because it dries with the client's body temperature. Erica J glue has a much stronger hold when you use it properly. However, for beginners, it would be pretty hard for you to spread this glue without it drying out. The Even Glue gives you some time to dry, and it also provides a strong hold when it's all together. Before I use any products, I test them with the other products that I already use. All of the products that I use during my install, they work together and not against each other. This is a very important factor when you're installing wigs. You do not want to use products that work against each other. I do about 3 to 4 layers depending on the client, the temperature, the weather, etc. If it's hot outside, I usually do 4 layers, but if it's pretty cool, I'll do 3 layers. Also, if you have a client that sweats a lot, I will use more layers of glue. My first layer of glue is really only for the cap. The same way we use the Got to Pre-Spray to lay the cap down, we're going to do that with glue now. By laying the cap down using the first layer of glue, this is going to help you when you go to spread the glue back and forth. This is also going to help your install last longer. If you have a cap that is coming up, eventually the lace comes up behind it because it is still a fabric at the end of the day. When you spread your layers out, you want to make sure you spread your layers out to be really thin. You want them to almost look clear when you're done spreading them out. Do not build up a second layer on top of a layer that is cakey. If the glue starts to cake up, it will ruin the install, guys, so make sure you're spreading your glue out as thin as you possibly can. What I use is a popsicle stick to spread my glue. I like the popsicle stick because it's really flat and it allows me to get that excess lace on the back of that popsicle stick and apply it to the cap. When you spread your glue out, you want to make sure you're not only putting the glue at the top of the cap, but the entire cap. So what I do is I go backwards after I glue my cap down. I spread it backwards, and then that excess glue that builds up, I apply it to the cap. You want the glue to be spread about an inch wide or more if you can. This is what's going to actually help hold your wig down and not just the tip of the lace. You can see me use like a scraping motion almost as I'm spreading the glue, but really I'm being light with my hand and spreading it everywhere. I'm making sure I go behind the ears, on the cap, and following the hairline. Guys, it's nearly impossible to put the glue specifically where the lace is going to lay at. Just make sure you get majority of the hairline and on that cap. Once we have the lace on, we will use our Erica J glue to go more into detail with where we're going to put the glue at. Also, you do not want to make a widow's peak with the glue. We will glue the widow's peak down last. Your main focus right now should just be getting the glue on the cap and spreading enough glue to hold the wig. Once we have our wig on, we'll go in more with our Erica J glue and specifically apply the glue where we need it to go at. Once your glue turns clear, you're going to go in and apply your lace. So we always start by applying the middle first. Whether you have a widow's peak or not, you always want to put the middle down first. This way the wig does not ripple up. Now I'm going to go in with my steel comb and I'm going to apply the right side of the lace and the left side of the lace. The lace always goes in front of the cap. How far in front of the cap it goes depends on your client's head shape, your preference, and how you pluck. If you have a client with a really low hairline, you don't want to bring the lace too far in front of the cap. But since my client does not have a super low hairline and she also has a lot of forehead space to work with, I can pull it down as much as I want to. Once I have the right side of the lace down, I'm going to let the client hold it, but I'm still going to keep my hand on the left side this way that the client does not pull the side all the way down. A lot of times we have our clients hold the lace and they end up pulling it. Make sure you tell them to hold it, but do not pull it. And make sure when they pull it, you're keeping your widow's peak center on that line that we drew. This line is our guideline, and this is going to make sure our wig is directly in the middle and our widow's peak is directly in the middle. You do not want your widow's peak to move because this will ruin your complete install. Remember, I told you guys even glue turns clear, but that does not mean it's dry. This is why as soon as that glue turns clear, you want to put the lace in it because the lace will end up drying with the glue, giving it a stronger hold. Once I have my lace and my glue, I'm going to use my steel comb to melt. I only use this comb for one thing, and that's to melt or apply some extra glue if necessary. The difference between a steel comb and a carbon comb is that the carbon comb can take heat, but the steel comb actually reinforces heat. So by me using this steel comb and my blow dryer on medium heat and high speed, I'm actually pushing heat into the glue and I'm allowing the lace and the glue to melt together. This is super important, guys. I have this comb in my Amazon storefront. This is the only comb I would like to use to melt. Just the fact that the comb heats up and it actually reinforces the heat all throughout the lace and the glue helps so much. This is a very, very important step that you do not want to skip. It literally will make or break your install, and it'll also help your client's lace last much longer if you allow the glue and the lace to dry together. While the client was holding the lace, I hurry up and dried it on heat with my steel comb. Now I'm going to apply the band, that way I can allow it to melt and to stick together. You want to be very quick while they're holding it because their hands will get fatigued and eventually they'll end up moving their hands. I apply my band over the widow's peak first and then on the sides of the head. But since there's no glue on the widow's peak, guys, you do not have to hyper focus on making sure that you have the band over the widow's peak. The band really serves to connect the lace and whatever glue is underneath the lace, and it also gives you a really seamless melt. I use a wide band for this step. Elastic band works by using tension, so before you apply that band, you want to make sure you stretch it all the way out and then put it directly on the lace. Now that the band is on, I can use my steel comb to go in and reinforce that heat. So I start off with medium heat and high speed, and I'm basically scratching the lace, pushing the lace, doing what I have to do to make it push itself into the glue and also dry at the same time. Once I'm done, I'm also going to scratch it with my hands, not only just the comb, and then I'm going to go in with the blow dryer on cool and seal it after that. So first we blow dry it on heat, and then you go back in on cool and you scratch it and you allow it to dry. While the band is still on, we're going to go ahead and secure the wig. The way I secure my wigs is by sewing them down. I sew everyone's wig down depending on the client's head shape. So if you have a client that doesn't want their wig sewn down, what you can do is just use the clips. However, I prefer to sew the wig down because this allows the wig to stay in place. I'm pulling it firmly, but I'm not pulling it backward. I'm just pulling it that way I can go ahead and sew it down and see where I'm sewing. The way I sew it down is I go through the cap and underneath the track. I sew in the middle of the wig, not towards the back, because I don't want to pull the wig all the way back. I'm also sewing on that bulkiness on the braid. Remember when we did the braid down, guys, and I told you make sure you're connecting them in the back past the ear? This is why that step is important, because connecting those braids in the back gives us a really firm foundation to sew on. Pay close attention to how I'm sewing this down. It may look like I'm being rough. I promise I'm not, y'all. I'm just holding that wig pretty firm. I'm pulling it down to make sure it fits, and then I'm sewing on top through the cap and then underneath the track. I'm sorry, guys, I am kind of heavy-handed, so everything I do, it looks like I'm doing it rough, guys. I promise you, I just have a good grip. I'm really not pulling it backward, because when we place the wig on, it already fit. I'm basically just pulling it down. That way I have no humps and no lumps in between my wig. To get a flat install, you don't want to skip this step. You want everything to be flat. Now, if I have a client whose wig is big in the back, I will go in and part and sew down on that anchor braid. Since this wig fits her perfectly, we do not have to sew in the back. Most clients prefer you not to sew it in the back because it does irritate them sometimes, but if you sew it the right way and you don't sew it too tight, you can sew onto that first braid, which is that anchor braid that we did. This will also help you hold your wig and it'll stop it from flapping around in the back. However, once again, this wig did fit her really well, so we only put the comb through the braid in the back. Once we're done sewing it down on the other side, I'm just gonna secure my thread in place. So I'm gonna sew again in that same spot and I'm gonna make a knot. I specialize in really clean and really neat installs. So throughout my entire install, you're going to see me using a hot comb, just making sure everything is still in place and everything is flat. Once I'm done sewing everything down, we can go ahead and take the band off. What we did with the band is just the first melt. Once we take the band off, we're going to go ahead and comb out anything that may have been mushed or any glue that is sticking to the hair. And then we're going to go in and cut our lace. First things first, always pull your widow's peak down and make sure your widow's peak is centered in its place. Make sure you're checking the widow's peak throughout the entire install before you cut the lace to make sure it hasn't moved, because sometimes when the client pulls it, they may pull it too tight and the widow's peak may move a little bit over to the left or to the right. Since this is not the final melt, then it's fine, it's easy adjustable, but make sure you check the widow's peak all throughout the install. To cut my lace, I start by cutting down the middle first. I use tiny scissors and I keep my first finger and my third finger inside the scissors, and I move the scissors in my hand up and down with my thumb. The only finger that is moving is my thumb. When you cut your lace, you want to cut the lace close to the hairline but not too close. Leave a little bit of lace in front. That way you can have a seamless natural look. If you cut directly at the beginning of the hairline, then I'm telling you guys, it's going to look exactly like a wig. To get your wigs to look as natural as possible, leave that excess lace in the front. Don't worry, we're going to glue it down, and once it's melted, it's going to look like it's coming from the scalp. This is a tip to get that scalp effect, keeping a little lace in front. Also guys, remember when you're cutting, you do not want to cut straight across. You want to move your scissors up and down, creating indentations in the lace. If you cut the lace straight across, it's going to be seen even more because the eye detects a straight line. So by cutting it up and down and making a jagged cut, it actually helps you blend the lace even more. Straight lines are way too easy to be seen by the eye. This is why when you cut your lace straight across, you can still see it no matter how melted it is. After the lace is glued down and I have the wig all the way on and the lace all the way cut, we're going to go in and part out our ears and take our mini scissors and we're going to cut around the ears. Now when you cut around the ears, you don't have to do a jagged line. You can do a straight line because it is behind the ears. It's not going to be seen and it's pretty hard to cut it jagged, and there's no purpose of it. I do not cut the ears out before I glue the lace because with experience, sometimes I'll cut too much and then there will be lace missing from around the ear. After I go ahead and cut my lace around the ear, I'm going to finish defining it, cutting it, the ends of the lace off. You do not want your lace to come all the way down to the sideburns. I typically like my laces to stop right at the ear or a little below the ear. I kind of use the client's face as a guideline, but just to be on a safe side, just cut the lace and do not let it go too far down, especially if they have sideburns. If your client has long sideburns, you can leave them out and swoop them down with edges, or you can swoop them up and push them back. Notice how I'm cutting, guys. I'm cutting up and down. I'm moving my thumb to control the scissors, and I'm making sure I cut around that widow's peak. You definitely do not want to cut straight across the widow's peak. You want to cut around and leave some excess lace in the front. Once you cut your widow's peak off, you can go in and define the cut more by cutting it and making sure it's in a V shape. And once again, guys, make sure you leave a little bit of lace in front to get that seamless melt. I'm using my clips to push the hair out of my way, and I'm making sure I part around the ear. And before you cut around the ear, make sure you pull the ear down. Sometimes when you put the band on, the ear will stick to the glue, and then once you cut around the ears, you'll realize you cut too much. So pull the ear outward first and then cut around the ears. Once I cut my ears out, I'm going to go in and define my widow's peak even more. When you're cutting the lace in front of the widow's peak, make sure you're cutting it in a V shape. Do not cut it straight across because it won't appear to be a widow's peak anymore, and it will also show. I use pointed scissors. Be very careful when you're cutting around the ears or just in general around the face, because it's really easy to cut your client if you're not paying attention or if you're being too rough. Also guys, when you're cutting your lace, make sure you're taking your time. It may look like I'm moving fast because I sped up some parts of the video, but I actually do take my time with every single step in the install. This is one of the most important steps, and it will make or break your install. A little tip I give my students when they take my class: when you cut the lace, you can leave out a lot of lace and then go in and define it and make it more perfect. Don't try to cut it perfect the first time. Just get the lace off of there and go in and take out more as you need it. Remember I told you guys the very last thing we do is the widow's peak, but throughout the install before it's finally glued down, I constantly go in and I check. Whenever you're applying the widow's peak, make sure you're slightly pulling it forward. That way it can give you that peak effect. Right now, I'm just checking the hairline, make sure I cut all the excess lace that I wanted off, and making sure my widow's peak falls how it's supposed to. This is where you can also go in and make your widow's peak sharper if you like by plucking it. Next, I'm going to pin the hair back and use my Erica J Hold Me Down glue, and I'm going to apply my excess lace. Never glue the front down first. Always start with the sides and then go in the middle. If you glue the middle down first and then you do the sides, then you will most likely get ripples into the wig. I always do at least one side first and then I'll transition into the middle and do the other side. But never glue the middle down first. Glue the sides down first. That way you can properly get the wig on and then go in towards the middle. Since we are at the edge of the lace, the amount of layers really all depends on how much lace did not stick. I do anywhere from 1 to 2 layers, but I try not to do too much because we are at the very end of the lace and we do not want it to cake up towards the end of the lace. The even glue pretty much holds majority of the wig, so our Erica J glue is just going to go in and stick down the pieces that did not stick. When we're putting the excess lace down with the Erica J glue, I use anywhere from 1 to 2 layers. One layer of Erica J glue is strong enough to hold the install for a long time. I do 2 sometimes to be on the safe side. It really depends on the type of client I have and how long the client plans on keeping the lace down. Remember, we're also going to melt a time after this, so even if you just do 1 layer, most of the time it's enough. I do not use the even glue to glue the excess lace down because it's not as strong as Erica J's glue. Also, to get strength with the even glue, you need multiple layers, and it's not good to add multiple layers when you're at the very tip of the lace. Erica J glue dries to body temperature, meaning that it dries pretty quickly when you put it on. This is why it's best to use for that excess lace that did not stick down in the front. Also, it's stronger and you don't even need as many layers. This is the goal. You don't want to have too many layers in the front because it's just going to make your install cakey and it will work against your install and whatever products you use on your install. As we finish gluing that excess lace down on the sides, we're going to work our way into the middle. Now you don't want to go in and immediately shape the widow's peak out with the glue. You want to start by getting everything else that you pull forward glued down. And as you glue the widow's peak down, remember you want to pull it forward the same way you were pulling it forward while we were putting it on. Make sure you're pinching the widow's peak, pulling it out of place, and you work your way up all the way into the peak. You don't have to glue it all down at once. You want to glue it piece by piece. So I start in the back and then I work my way up to the front and eventually I work my way up into that V. While you're pushing it in, you want to make sure you use your comb and you're scratching it and putting pressure on it so that the glue and the lace actually stick together. You do not want to just put it down and move forward. You see how I have no ripples? That's what you want. You don't want your wig to start rippling up at all. If you try to glue everything down together at once, it will not work. So be very careful and be sure that you're taking your time working your way up into that widow's peak. Once you finally get to the tip, you can go ahead and create your V and stretch your lace and apply it into that. Make sure when you're doing it, guys, you're holding the peak and pulling it down. The end of the widow's peak is a really small piece of lace and sometimes we don't always glue it down. You want to make sure you actually go back in and put glue exactly where the end of that widow's peak is because that's usually the part that lifts first if it's not properly glued down, especially since it's a small piece of lace. When I'm done applying my widow's peak, I just go in and do a check to make sure I like the shape and I like how it's laying. Now, once I get the shape that I desire, I just go in and define it more with my scissors and cut off any excess lace that I may not need. Remember, guys, when you're cutting around the widow's peak, you want to make sure you cut it in a V shape and not straight across. Also, you do not need a lot of excess lace in the front of the widow's peak because it will show since it's a very small piece of lace. Whatever I do on one side of the widow's peak, I do on the other. That way I make sure it's even. Once I have everything glued down, I'm just going to go in with my comb and push the lace into the glue. And then we're going to get into another melt. I use a Tresemme holding spray. You can find it at most stores. I love Tresemme holding spray because it's not heavy, but it gets the job done. It melts and it's firm. I do not spray directly on the lace ever because lace is still a fabric and it is too thin to hold all of that product. If you spray directly on a lace, you have more of a chance of your lace lifting. I spray the product on my finger and then I apply it to the lace, and then once I'm done, I blow dry it again on medium heat and high speed while pushing it in with my comb. I do this on the entire lace until I have everything melted. When you purchase this holding spray, you want to make sure it says holding spray. I use number 4 or number 5. For video purposes, I use number 4, but number 5 works just as well and it's just as firm. Number 4 is a little bit lighter and it's workable, so you don't have to worry about it turning white and flaking up. Since the number 5 Tresemme is much stronger, it does turn white if you over apply, so just be very careful. You can honestly use any holding spray of your choice, however this is my preference. Most holding sprays are really sticky, they turn white, and they do leave a lot of residue. I choose Tresemme because Tresemme does not leave a lot of residue. Also, when I go in to do baby hairs, it does not interfere, but it still gets the job done and it holds on to the lace very well. I do not use a lot of product when I'm installing lace because the more product you use, the quicker the lace lifts up. Once everything is glued down, now I'm going to go in with a little bit of makeup, my client's skin tone, and I'm going to apply it on top. Remember guys, it's okay to apply makeup on top, but never underneath the lace because it acts as a barrier. I'm going to spray just a little bit of my heat protectant on top just so I can scratch some of that product out. That way when I put the band on, it does not get hard. This will not remove the lace if you're very gentle and light with it, and then comb everything into place. Throughout my entire install, before I move on to the next step, I always check my widow's peak in my middle part to make sure my widow's peak in my middle part is still in the middle, and I just see how it's going to lay when I do lay it. If you do this, this will avoid you having any surprises at the end of your install when you're all done and ready to style. With some transparent laces, you may not always get the perfect melt in the beginning, but just trust the process, do all the steps, and I promise you your results will be amazing. The same cap that we cut off in the beginning is the same cap we're going to use to melt the lace. Now, we never apply the band directly to the lace because the band will melt, but as soon as you take it up, it will pull it up with it. I always recommend my clients to even tie their hair down with the cap. We're going to put the band over the cap. That way we can get a melt without ruining the lace and also ruining your band. The material of the cap is 100% nylon. Nylon does not stick to glue very easily, which makes it perfect to melt the lace. This is why it's very important to not cut your cap sloppily like I said in the beginning, because since we already cut the cap on her head, it's automatically going to fit her head. After we have the lace tied down and secure, we're going to get into the styling. It doesn't matter if I'm doing curls, crimps, or straightening the hair, I always section the hair out. My first 2 sections are behind the ear and then the back is split down the middle. You can slow the video down that way you can see more accuracy of the sections, but I section always behind the ear first and the back is split into 2. Before we do anything, we want to make sure we're covering our tracks. So I'm going to go in, start at the middle part, and come downward to try to use some hair to cover the tracks. This is a 13x6 lace, so it's very important that we cover the tracks since it's a lace front. But by being a 13x6, we have a little bit more room to work with. With 13x4 wigs, it's kind of harder to cover the tracks. However, it is possible. Just follow these steps. When I cover my tracks, I start at the middle part and I go about 2.5 inches downward, and I make sure I'm pulling out enough hair to cover the tracks. Once I pull the hair out, I use my wax stick and my hot comb to make it flat. When I use my hot comb, you can see I actually put pressure on the hot comb and make sure I'm pushing it into the hair so I can cover my tracks and so that it lays flat without me having to put any extra product on it. Once you see that you covered the tracks, you're going to comb the hair back together as you see that I'm doing now. Now when you do this, this is to make sure that there's no separation from the frontal and the rest of the wig. Once I comb the hair back together, I go back in and section it out behind the ear. Remember, the first 2 sections are always behind the ear and the back is split in half. Anytime I'm doing a style and I want it to be neat and also stay, I use my Luster's wax stick. Y'all, I really love the Luster's wax stick. Out of all the wax sticks I tried, this is the one that I've been the most consistent with. I actually love how it melts with my hot comb. However, with the Luster's wax stick, you want to be very careful because if you overuse it, it can be super oily and go through your wig. I usually use it for styles that I want to stay in place, but I'm very light with it. After I'm done covering my tracks, I go in and comb the hair back together and make my section again. I take some hair from the frontal and the rest of the wig. That way it can all come together and there's no separation in the wig. Whatever you do on one side, guys, always do on the other side, especially when you're doing the middle part. What I'm doing now is just going back from the other side that I just completed to the side that I'm on now and making sure that the part is even, applying my wax stick with my hot comb and pressing it out. I make sure I press everything out so that it's flat, and then I comb all the hair back together and make my section again behind the ear. After I have my hair all sectioned out while I still have the band on, we're going to go ahead and we're going to make the install flat. Now this is one of the key things I do to get a flat install every single time. I don't care what style I'm doing, I will always section out the hair, use my wax stick and my hot comb to make it flat. So when we're doing the middle part, especially when you're doing a widow's peak, you want to kind of slant it. You don't want to part it straight across. You want to kind of bring the top of the part up pretty much. Once you have your section out, you're going to apply your wax stick. When you apply your wax stick, do not push the wax stick in the actual head, but take your wax stick and lightly dab it on. This way, when you use the hot comb, no oil gets underneath and goes onto the lace or the cap. With my wax stick, I also use the green olive oil Fantasia spritz to make my install flat. When I do it, guys, I actually pull the hair out using the back of the hot comb to go ahead and press it out. Once I get it pressed out a little bit, I'm going to pull the band upward a little bit. That way I can get the roots of the hair. You pull the band upward, you want to make sure you're still covering the lace, just exposing the roots of the hair. My second section is going to be angled more towards the face, so we're going to part it slanted rather than straight across. You may not be able to see it, guys, but when I hot comb this, I actually put a lot of pressure. I pulled the hair outward and I used the back of my hot comb to press into the lace. That way I can get it to be super flat. Once I have everything flat, I go ahead and press out the roots. Remember, guys, the back of the hot comb gets hotter than the entire hot comb. So this is actually what I'm using and pressing into the hair to get it as flat as possible. Don't worry, guys, I did not burn her. I promise, it's just a stain. I make my parts slanted all the way up until I get to the top of the head, and we're going to do this all throughout the head. Notice how I'm parting it at an angle, guys. Once you get close to the widow's peak, you want to split the widow's peak up into two parts. We want everything to be super flat and natural looking, so we're going to make sure we keep slanting the parts and parting them as thin as we can once we get to the top. This way you have a widow's peak that's pressed out. If you try to press the entire widow's peak out by itself, it will not get as flat as you want it, and it also won't look as natural because it's still a peak. You want it to look thin out so that we can see exactly what we pluck, but you also want it to look natural and fall in the face as well. This is why you split up the widow's peak. Once you get to the top at an angle, use your wax stick and you hot comb it coming downward. Doing this step, guys, is also how you frame your client's face so that the hairstyle actually fits their face. This is another way to get that snatch look and that fresh hairdo look, because you're actually framing the hairstyle around their face. That way it's customized to fit them. Remember, guys, whatever you do on one side, you want to do on the other side. When you're framing the face, you probably split the hair up anywhere from 4 to 6 sections. Some wigs already come pressed out pretty well, so you won't have to go in and do as much. But once you get to the top, you always want to make sure you get your sections even smaller. That way you can have everything pressed out. As I mentioned earlier in the video, everything that we use today is going to be in my Amazon cart. However, the Andis hot comb is a hot comb you can also find on Target, and it's pretty affordable. What I love most about the Andis hot comb and most hot tools is that it comes with a warranty. So if your hot comb ever goes out, you can always send it back and they will either repair it or send you a brand new one. I only use Andis hot comb. I do not use any other hot combs. For some reason, I've only been able to get pretty natural and good results with Andis hot comb, and it has a long life. Now, after we're done framing the face on both sides, we're going to go in and conceal our part. Before I use black spray, I use the Clairol Root Touch-Up Stick. You can also get this from CVS or Walgreens. I just want to clean up the part before I finalize the install. That way I can have a really neat part at the end. The way you clean up your part is very preferential. This is a heavy product, so we don't need much. And also, once I do it, I'm going to make sure I'm not overdoing and I'm leaning her head into the product. That way it doesn't run all over the lace. This product is very messy, so be very careful when you use it. I try to do as much styling as possible that I can with the band on. That way I can get a really clean look and a really good melt. The longer the band is on, the more it'll melt. You don't want to leave the band on too long because it will start to hurt the client. I don't have a specific time frame for how long I leave the band on. I usually leave it on while I do the styling, the sectioning, and the cleaning up. Or if my client asks for the band to be removed, I'll go ahead and remove it for them early. If I remove the band, I do not remove the cap. The cap usually doesn't cause any pain. I'll remove the band without removing the cap. That way I can still have some type of melting going on while I finish doing the styling. Okay, so guys, remember that excess glue that was on the lace? What the cap does, because it's nylon, it removed all of that glue. There is a little bit of product, but we're going to go ahead and just comb that out. What I'm doing now is I'm taking my baby hair brush and I'm just combing out whatever may have stuck to the hair, and I'm combing the widow's peak in the way that I want it to fall. But using that cap is so important, guys. It removes all of that glue. So when I go and do my baby hairs, I will have no baby hairs sticking or no problems getting my baby hairs to lay down because that cap removed all of that excess glue. This is the main reason why I stopped using the lace band, because the lace band leaves a lot of product, especially if you use it for multiple clients. I've had my lace band for this specific client for about 2 to 3 months, and you can see it's still very clean because I only use it with the cap underneath. Now that everything's all stuck and down, we're going to go ahead and do our baby hairs. Now for the side edge, I like my edges to look really natural, and I go by what my client likes. This is a client of mine that's been a client for a long time, so I know what to do. I part the baby hairs across the ear, but I go straight across. I do not angle it or slant the part. I just go straight back. Now if you want dramatic edges, you can bring the baby hair part up a little bit, but not too high. Before I start doing anything, I make sure I hot comb it. Notice how I slant my hot comb, and I promise y'all I did not burn her. She just hate the hot comb. You should always hot comb the baby hairs before you do them, because if not, they will curl up, especially if you have curly hair. You will hot comb it twice if you have curly hair. That way you can get the natural curl pattern out. Since this hair is already straight, we don't have to hot comb it too many times. I did bring some extra hair into the baby hair so that it's not too low or too thin, but you want everything to be straight. That way you have your baby hairs as neat as possible. When we were plucking, I told you guys the last row that we part out, the part that we did not pluck because we're going to use it for baby hairs, this is the same row that I'm going to pull out for the baby hairs. Now, when I pull these baby hairs out, I use the eyebrows as a guideline. You have clients, some clients have small foreheads, big foreheads. So the way you do your baby hairs, you just want to shape them around their face. I use the end of the eyebrow as a guideline. I typically don't want the baby hairs to come too much in the face, but it all depends on the client. I have some clients who prefer their baby edges to be close together. You want some to start lower, some to start higher. So it all depends on what the client likes and what looks good. Before I do anything, I just swoop it to see how it's going to look and where it's going to fall, and I adjust the baby hairs from there. If I feel like it's coming out too far, I will put some hair back, and if I feel like it's not far enough, I'll pull some more hair out. Now, when it comes to baby hairs, a lot of people struggle with this. So I'm going to tell you, my main thing with edges to get them right every time is to make sure you're practicing how it's going to look before you actually finalize it. Before I do anything, I just go ahead and swoop it with my finger. I hold it. I swoop with the same direction I do baby hairs in, and I just keep doing it until I like what I see. If you practice it, it'll save you a lot of time and a lot of swooping once you actually go in with the product to lay the edges down. Once we're finally ready to do baby hairs, we're going to pin the hair back out of our way. This way it doesn't interfere when we get to swooping. After that, I'm going to go in and then just make my baby hairs look a little bit more natural by plucking them. Usually the one by the ear has the most hair in, so you'll have to pluck it just a little bit to get it to look a little more natural, but it's all preference, like I said. After I pluck them, I'm going to cut them. The length that I cut them usually depends on what the client is going for. This client let me have creative control, so I did baby hairs on her that I usually like. So when I cut this first edge by the ear, I usually use the ear as a guideline. I don't like the baby hair to be too much longer than the ear. I let it to sit at least like right under the ear. So I pull it down and then I cut it. Once it's fluffed out, I'm going to go ahead and curl it underneath. I do not curl upward because I feel like that works against the way I swoop with my fingers. I always curl it going underneath. If you like the way it's curled upward, then you can still curl it upward, but for beginners, I would recommend curling downward. That way when you go to swoop it, it's much easier. Now, when I cut my baby hairs, I pull them forward and I cut them straight across. It creates a natural layer, but you don't want it to be layered too much. And when you do your baby hairs, you want the front of your baby hair to always be shorter than the back of the baby hair. Now, even though we're doing the front of the baby hair shorter than the rest of it, you still don't want the beginning of the edge to be too short. You want it to be a slight layer, but by pulling it forward and cutting it straight across, you'll create that slight layer. You'll notice it more once you start to swoop. When I cut my baby hairs, I always cut the baby hairs longer than I need them to be, and then I curl them. Once I swoop them, if I feel like I want to go shorter, then I go shorter. I always cut them longer just to be on the safe side, because you can always go shorter, but you can never add that hair back once you cut it. This little mini curling iron that I'm using gets very hot. It's also made by Red by Kids, and it's the pencil curling iron. This is also in my Amazon storefront. Because it gets so hot, guys, you also want to be very careful, because this can burn the client just like the hot comb can. When you curl it, you want to make sure you pull the hair upward. Before I put any product on the baby hairs, guys, we actually are going to swoop them to see how they're going to look. We're going to cut them if we need to, and then we're going to finish them with product. If you or your client enjoys the soft baby hairs, what I would recommend is after you swoop these and get them in position without product, spray a light holding product on it and just lay it down. This will give a soft, natural look. However, they must know how to maintain it because it does not last as long. Now, this is my key to perfect edges every single time. If you struggle with doing baby hairs and your hands are always sticking to the baby hairs, or they just keep messing up, spray some of that heat protectant on your hand and then spray from a distance some got to be spray. You can use any holder spray of your choice. Got to be is just my preference because it's not as harsh. By me spraying that product on my fingers, I'm going to go in and swoop it, and my fingers are not going to stick to the baby hairs, and I'm going to get it right the very first time I swoop it. Be very light when you spray it, and also mist it on your hands. Don't necessarily spray too much. When I do my baby hairs, I start by putting my comb at the very beginning of the baby hair. I swoop it in a C shape while using my other finger to hold that hair in place. Now, I am not using my blow dryer when I do my baby hairs at all, and they're still going to stay in place. Because we installed this wig without spraying a bunch of product on the lace, we didn't use any makeup. Whatever product you use to go into baby hairs is automatically going to work. You do not need to use a blow dryer when you're doing baby hairs this way, because when we did the install, we barely used a lot of product. We didn't use a lot of spray on the lace, and we also didn't use any makeup, so whatever product you put is automatically just going to work with the hair. This is why it's very important to follow these instructions step by step so that you do not have to use a lot of product on your lace. That way, when you do apply product, it actually works and gets on the lace. And also making sure you clean your client's hairline with that 70% alcohol before you do anything else. Once I'm satisfied with my baby hairs, I go ahead and check it to see if there's anything that I want to change. And I also use my hot comb to get that end piece to go into the hair. Once I'm done, I'm going to seal my baby hairs with some spray and just blow dry it on medium heat. I'm always spraying from a distance. That way I avoid overspraying the lace and overspraying the hair. Do not spray directly on the head. Always use your hand to cover the client's face and spray from a distance. This way you can get the product without overloading the product. It also gives you time to keep going in as much time as you need without the product turning white. Too much spray will ruin your lace, it'll lift your lace, it'll ruin your edges, and it'll turn your baby hairs white. The reason you are struggling with baby hairs is because you may be using too much product. I do not use a lot of product, as you can see. I just use a little bit of heat protectant on my fingers so that my fingers don't stick, and I just spray the lace from a distance, and that's all. You can use any holding spray of your choice. However, I do not recommend using Eben, the black spray, for the edges. You can use the Eben to seal the edges, but do not use it to swoop the edges because it does not give you room to work with. Any light holding spray will do the job. Got to be is not as strong as it used to be, which helps a lot because it does not turn white, but it dries with a good amount of time for you to keep swooping. Also, if you use less product, you have more time and many more chances to go in and keep using that product to get the baby hairs how you like. The whole purpose of me not using a lot of product is so that I can keep going in and getting my baby hairs perfect without it turning white. Now, my client likes that little baby hair that goes in the middle, so I just take some edges from the baby hair we did down by the ear. I curl it back underneath, and then I just place it there and spray it to hold it down. This is optional. Like I said, baby hairs are preferential, and you just do what you like or what your client likes. Another key point to getting perfect baby hairs is you want to make sure you're using a very light hand. If you use a light hand and you take your time and swoop them slow, you will get baby hairs to come out neat every single time. I do not press into the hair because I don't want my finger to stick to the edges that I'm trying to do. I actually use a very light hand and I take my time. You don't have to rush to do baby hairs. You can also swoop very slowly and still get you a neat baby hair. Do not try to rush it. If you're racing against time, just let your client know you want to make sure her style is perfect, but do not rush and do baby hairs because this is one of the most important aspects of the install. Now, at this point in the video, you guys can kind of tell my style of doing hair. I use my hot comb a whole lot, especially when I'm doing a widow's peak. Once I get my baby hairs done, I'm just going to go in with my hot comb and I'm going to begin styling. I use the hot comb to keep the hairstyle neat every time. This is why my styling is so neat, because throughout the entire install, I'm always going in and checking and rechecking to make sure I like how things lay, even if I'm not laying them just yet. I'm just using some heat without any product and framing the face again. I'm using my finger to kind of make that indentation as a guideline for the widow's peak to fall towards the face, but not necessarily in her face. I do this a whole lot before I move on to my next step. I've already done the baby hairs on both sides, so now I'm going to get ready to cut my layers. But before I cut my layers, I just want to make sure everything is in place. That way when I do cut the layers, everything falls exactly how I want it to fall. Once I have everything in place, I'm just going to take some of my duck clips and pin them so that they do not move while I cut the layers. This is a very, very important step, because if your layers or your hair moves before you start layering it, once you layer it, you'll have to go shorter and shorter to get it even on both sides. So you want to make sure that your widow's peak on both sides is starting and ending at the same place. Here's another tip, guys. When I work, I typically work with a light bulb that has a white light and a cool light. For video purposes, I use a cool light so you can see it better. However, when I'm color matching, this light also helps me a whole lot. This light is also in my Amazon cart as well. When you're working with a dark skinned girl, you want to use an orange light to color match. Once I take my client from under this light and turn off all the lights and check her in a natural light, her lace will be her exact skin tone. When working with transparent lace, you want to work with a cool light. When you're working with HD lace, you want to work with sort of a warm light, because HD is already skin-like. But the best light to work with is always going to be natural sunlight. Once I have everything in place and even at the top, we're going to go in and cut out layers. When I start with the two front pieces that will be the bang, and I pull them together and I cut. I always start my layers underneath the chin. If you want deeper layers, you can always cut it higher up. Once I have my front pieces cut, I'm going to cut everything else following an angle that is all going to align with what we just cut. So I pull the hair forward and I'm just going to use my scissors and angle down, creating like a slanted line almost to get some layers. We're going to keep the layers very subtle. I'm not going to go super short so that the hair still looks good straightened. When I cut the layers, I'm going to hold the scissors at a slight angle, not just straight across. And then I'm going to angle the hair kind of upward just a little bit when you're cutting it. This is going to give it that blended look without it looking choppy. So when you do curl or straighten it, the layers are going to melt right into place, but it's also not going to be too obvious. Once you finish that first section, you're just going to grab the section right behind it, bring it forward and match it to the guide that you just cut. Keep holding the hair at that angle and cut softly into it. Do not rush it. And then you just keep working your way around section by section so that everything blends together nice and smooth. Now that I'm done with my right side, I'm going to go over to my left side. I am right-handed, so it's kind of hard for me to cut the layers on the opposite side. So instead of me cutting it how I showed you in the beginning, I'm actually going to pull it downward and I'm going to flip it backward and cut my layers. Once I flip it back forward, you'll see that it naturally falls how it's supposed to. There's really no difference in the way I'm cutting. The only difference is the way I'm holding the hair, because it's easy for me to hold it in. I also get perfect layers this way. I am still holding the hair at an angle and not just cutting straight across. And we're going to make sure we're going section by section. We're making sure we're angling it, and we still want long layers because we want this hair to still look good while it's straightened. Since the hair is already straight, you can see now that if we were to just silk press this right now, it would look really good. The layers wouldn't be too short or too noticeable, and this is my goal. These are very beginner friendly layers, so they're easy to do, and they also are very convenient for clients who don't want to chop their wig up just yet. Now I'm just going in and perfecting my cut, making sure everything is even, making sure there's no straggly pieces of hair, and making sure that the layers fall perfectly. What we just did are only face framing layers. We're only cutting in the front sections, like on both sides behind the ears. I don't cut the back too much, so when I pull the hair all together, those front layers are really going to pop and give us that curled roller set look without having to chop up the whole head. And it's also going to keep the hair full but give it shape and movement. Now once we get to the back, I'm going to cut it into like a soft V shape, because it's going to keep the length while giving the hair a little shape and flow. This is going to help the curls fall really nicely, and it's also going to give like a layered vibe without actually cutting a bunch of layers in the back. That way when it's straight or curled, it's still going to look full and has a real pretty like natural movement. And that's really all you need for beginner-friendly layering, just enough to give the curls some shape but still keep the hair full and smooth for when they want to wear it straight. It's simple and it's very versatile. We're done cutting our layers. We're going to go ahead and section the hair like we did before, and then we're going to get straight into curling. Use the T3 curling iron in a 1 1/4 inch size, which is also measured out to 1 1/4 or 1.25. It's perfect for getting those tight curls that drop into a fluffy roller set look. You can also go into a 1 1/2 inch barrel if you want bigger, looser curls with more of like a soft wave. The 1.25 is my go-to though because it holds shape while still giving it bounce. Use the red heat protectant to prevent damage and add shine, and then the green spritz for hold so that the curls last and stay soft. When I'm curling, I always make sure that the clip is facing downward and I rotate the curling iron upward to really lock in that curl and get a nice bounce. As I go, I like to feed the hair in by gently opening and closing the clip, almost like clicking it so it smooths as I wrap it around. As I'm curling it, you can see that I'm making sure the hair comes out of the left side of the curling iron. Since we're on the right side, the hair is going to come out of the left side, and I'm going to hold that hair. That way I don't wrap it up the wrong way. When you're on the left side, you want the hair to come out of the right side of the curling iron. This way you have curls that frame the face once you pull them forward. I slowed the video down so that you guys can closely watch what I'm doing. However, when you are working with a curling iron, you want to move pretty fast because you do not want the hair to start to burn and stick. If you want to practice this motion, you can turn your curling iron off and just practice taking the hair through the curling iron and holding that hair and wrapping it around. That way, when you do start to do it, you're able to move fast so you don't burn the hair. Once I'm done with my curl, I'm going to spray it with a light holding spray. I use the Tresemme. I use it just to seal and lock in that curl. This is going to help make sure it doesn't drop as soon as my client leaves the chair, and it's going to keep that nice bounce. After I spray it, I pin the curl up because curls only last if you let them cool in place. The cooling time is really what sets the shape, and it's going to give you long-lasting bouncy curls that's going to hold all day. When I'm curling, I part the hair out row by row and I stack the curls on top of each other. Don't stack them side by side. This is going to give you a fuller look with more volume instead of the curls falling flat. I repeat the same exact steps as I move up to each row to keep it consistent. When I'm on the right side of the head, I always make sure the curls are going toward the left. So as I'm curling it, I'm going to hold the hair that's coming out of the left side of the barrel, and this is what's going to give that curl the nice uniform flow once they come all together. As I'm curling, I like to hold the curl on the barrel for about 3 to 7 seconds. This is just enough time to heat through without burning the hair. This is going to help set the shape while keeping the hair healthy and shiny. The thicker the section, the closer you hold it to 7 seconds. For finer and thinner hair, 3 to 5 seconds usually does the trick though. I curl the hair upward on the barrel, and when I'm ready to drop the curl, I turn the barrel downward so it slides right into my hand. This way I can catch the curl gently, keep its shape, and then I pin it up to cool. You guys have this video forever, so feel free to slow it down as many times as you need, rewatch it, and really take your time learning the steps at your own pace. Now these are super simple beginner friendly curls, so you do not need to overdo it with a bunch of small sections. The more curls you try to do, the less volume and movement that you'll get. But if you take nice medium sized sections and do about 4 to 5 curls on each side, you'll get big fluffy curls with a lot of bounce. This also helps your style last longer, and it's going to keep the hair looking full and soft at the same time. When I'm doing these curls, I am pinning them up with the large duck clips or the longer duck clips, and I also have my client holding them and passing them to me. Like I said, guys, do not be afraid to ask your client to help you because it's going to help you work a lot smoother and faster. You don't want to have the curl in your hand hot while you're sitting waiting to try to find a pin. Once I get to that last curl all the way to the top, I'm going to take either my curling iron or a hot comb to just press the top out. That way I don't have any lumps or humps in my curls, and I'm going to curl that upward as well. However, you do not want to curl it all the way to the top. You want to stop it so that the curls sit on top of each other about halfway. If you curl it all the way to the top, you're going to have a high curl in the back, and it does not look good, I promise you. Don't want to curl it all the way upward. You want that top curl to sit right on top of the curl that you just did. Also remember, making sure you're holding it for 3 to 7 seconds and then pin it as soon as you're done. So guys, everything we do on the right side of the head, we're going to do the exact same thing on the left side. But now that we're on the left side, we want the curls to come out towards the right. So the end of the hair is going to come out of the right side of the barrel. This keeps the hair flowing away from the face on both sides, and it's going to give you that even balanced look with a really pretty uniform finish at the end. Remember guys, go in with your clip facing downward, and then you're going to go in, grab the hair and twist it over to the right side of the head. Once you have it coming out of the right side of the barrel, just hold it and use your hand to guide it through the curling iron. I slowed the video down again, that way you guys can see exactly what I'm doing. Make sure you're opening and closing the clamp as you work the curling iron up and down. You want to click it while holding the hair and gently feeding it through. This is going to help smooth the hair. It's going to keep your curl clean and polished, and it's also going to prevent any harsh lines or clamp marks from showing in the curl. You also want to make sure you're curling away from the face. This is the whole goal for both sides of the head. Make sure you're curling away from the face, that way when you put it towards the face, it frames the face. Again guys, after you're done curling, make sure you spray it with that light holding spray. Spray it from a distance, do not saturate it, and then pin it up. Another thing to mention that will also help you get your curls to come out smooth: before you start to curl, after you spray your red and your green spray, make sure you actually comb the hair out. That way you don't run into any like naps or tangling while you're curling. Another helpful tip when curling guys is also paying attention to your heat setting. On the T3, I usually stay around the middle notches for most hair types, but if you're using a different curling iron, try to stay around 300 to 325 degrees on fine hair, and then for thicker hair, 375 to 400 degrees. For synthetic hair, you can curl it, but just make sure you're on the absolute lowest heat setting, usually like the first or second notch, or just check the packaging of the hair, because not all synthetic hair can take heat. For finer hair or thinner hair, make sure you hold the curl for 3 to 5 seconds, and for thicker hair, you can hold it from 5 to 7 seconds. If it's super thick raw hair, you can hold it just a little bit longer, maybe up to 10 seconds, but just be careful because you never want the heat to be too high. It can burn or damage the hair, and the goal is just to heat it up just enough to set the curl, but not fry the curl. Always adjust the heat and the timing that you hold the curl based on the hair that you're working with to keep it healthy and to get the best long-lasting results. You do not want to fry the hair because you want to straighten it eventually, and you don't want it to have heat damage. Also guys, here's another helpful tip. Since we're working with straight hair, we didn't have to do it, but if you have body wave hair and you're doing curls, before you get into curling it, straighten it out with the actual curling iron. What I would do is I would take the hair and put it in my barrel as if I was about to flat iron it, and I would just drag it down to get that body wave pattern out of it. If you try to curl hair while it's already body wave, trust me, you're going to get two different curling patterns and you're not going to get neat curls. If you don't want to use the curling iron to get the body wave pattern out, then you can go in and blow it out really well. That way you don't have two curl patterns interfering with each other. Some more bonus tips when curling guys: the direction that you curl definitely matters. Curling away from the face on both sides is going to give you that soft flowy look, but curling toward the face can create like a more vintage sculpted vibe, if that makes sense. Also, the size of your sections definitely matter, and they do change the look. Smaller sections will give you tighter, more defined curls, and bigger sections will give you loose, voluminous curls. Also, remember, always let your curls cool completely before you touch them or brush them out. That's what really locks in the shape and helps them last all day. Even though we're curling everything at different times, I'm still going to let my curls sit on the entire head for about 20 extra minutes after I'm done curling. And then before I take them out of the pen, I'm going to actually touch them to see that they're cool. You do not want the curls to be warm. You actually want them to be cooled down entirely. The longer you leave the pins in and allow the curl to cool down, the longer the curls will last and the prettier they are when you go to comb them out. Some clients do not like their curls combed out right away, especially if they have an event to go to. So in that case, I would just recommend still taking them down and combing them and styling them how you want them to drop, and then repin it. That way when the curls do drop naturally later, they fall exactly how you wanted them to fall. Positioning the curls exactly the way you want them to lay is very important, because once they cool and set, that is exactly the shape and the direction that they will hold. If the client doesn't want you to take them out at all, then just show them exactly how to comb them the right way. That way when they do drop them, they look exactly how you want them to look. Now that we're to the front of the head, we're going to begin doing the curls that shape the face. So first things first, I'm going to part out the hair that I use for the bang. This bang part is going to go in a different direction from the other curls. The rest of the curls are going to go the same direction that we did in the back of the hair. Remember, when we're on the left side of the head, we want the curl to come out the right side of the barrel. And when we're on the right side of the head, we want the curls to come out the left side of the barrel. Once I have the part for my bangs already sectioned out, I'm going to go in and curl the rest of the hair. This curl is going to go away from the face, but we're also going to curl it upward, making sure we keep the clip facing down, just as we did in the back. I'm only going to do about 2 to 3 curls on each side, and each of these curls are going to sit on top of each other. Remember guys, the wider your sections are, the more volume you will have. The thinner, the less volume you will have. So you don't want to do too many curls once you're doing the front pieces. Still following the exact same steps I did when we were curling it in the back. Doing the same motions, the same hand movements and everything else. Remember, once you're done, you want to spray it with your holding spray, any light holding spray, and you want to pin it up, that way it can cool. Since the front is like the main part that shapes the face, if you want, you can go ahead and curl the front first and then go to the back. There's no specific way to do it. However, most people like to curl the back first just to get it out of the way and then do the front. No matter which way you do it, you always want to make sure you allow your curls to cool so that they set even after you're done curling. I let mine set anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes. To get those pretty bangs that fall in the client's face, instead of curling the bang the same way you curl these, you want to curl the bang the opposite way. So the bang is going to be curled towards the face, and we're going to take the curling iron and go under. We're going to do the same exact thing on both sides. When we start to curl the bang, instead of the clip facing downward like how it is when we're doing the rest of the curls, the clamp is actually going to be upward. The reason that we curl the bang toward the face is so that it frames and softens the front, and it's going to give that really pretty face framing look. Everything else, however, is going to go away from the face, but we do that so we can keep the hairstyle open and kind of balanced. But the bang just adds that little pop in the front, and that's going to pull the entire roller set together. As I finish the rest of the curls, before I get to spraying the front, I'm going to make sure I'm covering the lace. This way I don't oversaturate the lace. Always cover the client's face and cover up your lace a little bit. That way your lace doesn't lift prematurely. Before I start curling it, I'm going to shape it with my finger again to make sure I'm curling it the right way. And I'm making sure everything is super neat, especially that widow's peak. You don't want to curl your hair and mess up your widow's peak, so make sure it's in place before you start curling. Because the pressure that you apply once you apply the curling iron is going to pull it and move it out of place, and you do not want to do that, because once you go in and fix your widow's peak, you may mess up your curls. So just be very careful and be very light-handed. Make sure you keep shaping it until it stays in place, and if you want to leave the pins in, you can. Once we start curling the bang part, notice how my clamp is facing upward, and I'm taking the hair and going underneath, but I'm going toward the face. Since we're on the right side of her head, I'm still making sure the hair is coming out of the left side of the barrel. If you want bigger bangs, or you want them to start higher up on the face, instead of starting the curl lower or towards the end right here, you can comb the hair upward and start curling higher up near the base of the head. Just follow the same pattern and motion that I was using, and this is going to give the bang more of a lift and make it sit higher on the face. I wanted to shape her face how it was, so I started my curl a little lower, but you can always go higher. I pin this curl, I'm just going to roll it up to where I want the curl to start at, and then I'm going to pin it. Once I pin the actual curl, whether I'm doing a widow's peak or not, I just go in and define that front part, and I pin it down with my duck clip again for it to stay. I use the end of the comb, I use my finger, or even a baby hair brush sometimes. That way, once we drop the curls and comb them, they literally fall right into place. The duck clip is just going to help it stay where we want it to stay at. When I pull my bang from the other side, I use the side that we just did as a guideline. You want to make sure your bangs are even on both sides. That way the hairstyle falls exactly how it's supposed to. If you part out a bang that's thinner or wider on one side, when you go to comb out the curls, you'll notice that it doesn't give you the look that you're going for. That's because the amount of hair on each side is uneven, and that's going to affect how the curls sit and blend. If you want to avoid that, guys, just adjust your section before you curling and make sure that you're parting it even on both sides. Or if you're done, just lightly tease it and shape the thinner side after you comb it out to make everything even and balanced and to give it a more seamless finish. When I part out my curls on the side, I want to make sure they're even. I try not to do more than 3 curls, and then the bang will be the 4th curl that I do. The reason being, I don't want the top of my bang or my roller set, I don't want it to be thin. You want it to blend with the rest of the hair, but you also want it to have a lot of volume. So make sure when you're sectioning them out, they're all even, and you want pretty full sections, not big, not too wide, but you want them to be full of hair. You don't want to curl small, thin sections. Now that we're on the left side of the hair, we want to make sure that the hair is coming out of the right side of the barrel. The end of the hair should be coming out of the right side. Once I drop my curl, I'm going to roll it up, pin it up, and spray it with my holding spray so that it sets. Once you're done curling, just turn the curling iron upside down and let the curl gently slide into your hand. Make sure you avoid dropping it or unrolling the curl before you pin it, because as soon as you drop it, y'all, it's going to loosen up the curl and it's going to affect how it sets. You want to keep that curl as tight and as intact as possible when you pin it so that it cools into the right shape, and you want it to hold that bounce and definition once you take it down. I slowed the video down just so you guys can see an exact motion. You can also see how the hair is coming out of the other side of the barrel now that we're on the left side of the head. The hair coming out of the other side of the barrel is so important, guys, when it comes to the direction of the curl, because it helps create curls that frame the face. It's also going to control the flow of the shape of the style, and this is going to make sure all of the curls blend together and fall just the way you want them to fall. Once you get to that last curl, the one right before you do the bang, you want to make sure the bang and that last curl match up with each other. You don't want to do either of them too high, because you want them to all frame the face and you want them to start and end at the same spot. Because we've already laid the hair, they're going to fall how they're supposed to fall, but you don't want any lumps into the top of your head, especially when it comes to your curls. You want everything to set nicely and you want it to start and end at the same spot. This is going to give it a cleaned up look, and it's also going to give it more volume. You do not want uneven curls or curls that start at different starting points, because it's going to force you to go in with your high comb and press the curls out, and that's initially going to make the install flat. You still want volume. You want a flat install, but you do not want flat curls or curls that are flat at the top. Remember, guys, since we're on the bang part, we're going to make sure the clamp is facing upward, and then we're going to curl it downward underneath towards her face. Since we're on the left side of her head, we want the hair to come out of the right side of the barrel. You want to make sure that you're keeping the curl as even as possible. Try to start and finish the curl at the same height on both sides, and when you pin it, place it in the same spot as it is on the other side. This is going to keep the install balanced, and it's also going to help the curls fall even when you take them down, because you want it to be very symmetrical from every single angle. If you're afraid of burning yourself, guys, T3 has some heat resistant gloves that you can use, or you can grab any other heat resistant gloves that work with styling tools. They will help you protect your fingers while you're wrapping or holding the hair, and you can also work closer to the barrel without having to worry about burning yourself and focus more on your curls. I definitely recommend getting some heat resistant gloves for beginners, because even though I've been doing hair for a while, I still kind of burn myself when I'm moving too fast. Now we pre-concealed the part while we had the band on with the root touch-up stick, so now we're just going to go in with some black spray. I use a Salon Graphic High Beams black spray, but you can use any black spray of your choice. We're using this black spray to make the part even more perfect and defined. I'm going to use the same exact comb that I used to create the middle part to help conceal it. This way I'm going to keep the middle part exactly in the middle, and the part is going to stay clean and sharp. I start by placing the comb in the middle of the face, the same guideline I used when I was doing my middle part, and I drag it up towards the wig, making sure that I apply pressure. That way my comb does not move out of place. Once I get to the tip of the widow's peak, I use a cap to cover it. That way I do not spray the lace or the actual widow's peak. If you're too afraid to do this, then just use the root touch-up stick with the mascara brush and it'll get you the same results. I typically always spray from a distance, that way I do not overspray, and then I just use this same guideline to go back in and clean up my part. Once I'm done, I'm going to go ahead and remove the cap, and I'm just going to check to make sure I concealed everything. Once I'm done spraying my black spray, I'm going to use my blow dryer to go in and dry it, because it is a wet product. I use the same color foundation as the client, or one shade lighter for my part. I never go 2 or 3 shades lighter, and I do not like to use a super white part. When I'm doing my part, I do not like to lift my makeup brush. I like to get the perfect line and then I drag that line all the way down. If you keep lifting your makeup brush, you're more likely to start your part at different places every single time. So get your perfect line and then just drag it down. Also, I'm not putting pressure on the makeup brush. I'm just dragging it down lightly. That way the part does not get wider as the brush spreads. Black spray gives a matte finish, so once I'm done black spraying, I'm just going to take some of my Got2b and some heat protectant just to give it that shine back. I'm going to blow dry the Got2b. Also, spraying the Got2b on top of the part gives it a clean look, and it also allows your part to last throughout the entire install. Be sure to spray the Got2b spray first right after you do the part, that way you can lock in the part, and then spray the heat protectant on top to get that shine. Do not do it the opposite way. Make sure you do Got2b first and then the heat protectant second. You don't want to spray too much heat protectant and then weigh down your curls, so I just spray some on my hand and rub it into the head. I use a styling comb and a wide tooth comb to comb out my curls. When I unpin my curls, I'm going to unpin them in the same order that I did them. Whatever I did first, I'll unpin first, and whatever I did last, I'll unpin last. I let my curls sit off camera for about 20 minutes before I unpin them. Also, once we have everything unpinned, we're going to use our hot comb and we're just going to flatten it out and pull it together just a little bit so that we can have them all even. I'm just making it super flat and super neat. This way my curls don't go all over the place and it doesn't cause a clear separation in the back. Once I have everything unpinned, I'm going to start positioning the curls where I want them to fall. I'll bring the curls forward and place them in front of my client, and I'm going to separate the right and the left sides. Then I'll have my client lean kind of towards me so I can get a neat and controlled comb out. Sometimes the curls in the front will flip the opposite direction when you're unpinning them, but that's okay. Just take your finger and guide them back the way you want them to flow. You see how the layers that we cut allow the curls to stack perfectly on top of each other? Also, the direction we curled them does this as well. This is exactly the look you want. Now I unpinned everything except for the bang. So first things first, I'm just going to go in with my wide tooth comb just to get a clear separation. As I'm combing it, I kind of have my hand behind it. This way I can guide the curls and get them to fall where I want them to fall. Once I'm satisfied with that, then I'll unpin my bang and get my bang to flow into the curls. Now combing out the curls is the most difficult part to some people, but it's really simple if you pay attention. I like to start with a wide tooth comb just to gently detangle and open up the curls, and then I finish it off with my styling comb to really shape everything. A lot of the times people tend to overcomb, so if you want to avoid that, just once you're happy with how it looks, stop. You'll notice as a stylist, I usually keep combing, but here I am focused on giving my client exactly the look that she wanted without overdoing it. I've been working with this client for a long time, so I know her style. This is the advantage of getting your clients to return back because it makes your job pretty easy. As I finish the side, I'm going to use my hot comb just to go ahead and get that hair to drop more around the face, and I'm going to do it on both sides. You want to make sure when using this hot comb, you're not hot combing your entire curl out, just the roots of the hair to get the curl to come together. Do not be afraid to comb the curls out because we let them set and cool after we curl them, so even after we comb them, they're still going to hold their shape. The type of comb that you use plays a really big role in how the final curl looks. Wide tooth combs help keep the curl more defined, but combs with tighter or finer teeth create a fluffier look and give it more volume because it breaks up the curls more. And do not forget to use your hand to open up and shape the curls as well. Your fingers are one of the best tools to get that softness and movement without pulling too much out of the curl. This is how I use my styling comb to get my curl fluffed out, and then I use my hand to place the curl where I want it to go. Since we already cut some light layers, it's going to be super easy to get the curl to come together. Once I'm satisfied with how the curl looks, I'm going to go ahead and pin it. This way I can actually set it with some holding spray and get the curls to stay in place. Even when you let the curls set and cool, how long they really last depends on the hair quality. Good quality human hair usually holds the curls really well, especially with the right preparation. But if the hair is over processed or dry, the curls might drop a little faster, so just be careful. And also with synthetic hair, even if it's heat friendly, the curls do not hold as long because the fibers are smoother and they don't lock in the curl like human hair does. Just keep that in mind when you're styling, and don't get upset if you see your curls dropping soon. Sometimes it's not you, it could be the wig or the quality of the hair that you're using. Whenever I comb out my curls, especially when I'm doing the bang or any curl in general, I comb it downward, but I put my hand underneath the curl, that way I can shape it and I follow the curl pattern. That way the curl does not drop or change direction. I'm very confident when I'm combing out my curls because I know that they're not going to drop since we let them completely cool down and set. So you'll see me messing them up and redoing them. I really keep working them until I like what I see. I promise you guys it's okay to keep combing your curls out. I also use my hand to shape them, and you can see that even though I've combed the hair out completely, the curls are still bouncy and fluffy. You just keep combing and shaping them until you get exactly what you want and how you want it. For this look, guys, we were going for more of a looser wave, so I went back in with the wider teeth on my styling comb to help the curls drop just a little bit, but I still wanted to give that soft, flowy, wavy look. How much you comb your curls out really just depends on the look that you're going for. If you want tighter curls, you could stop where I stopped before I made the curls to a little more body wave, and if you want looser curls, you can comb them out just a little bit more and make sure you're bringing your comb downward. Now once I am satisfied with my look, I'm going to spray a little of my green spritz and I'm going to go in and smooth that widow's peak out. I'm using my baby hair brush and I'm using a comb. You can use the brush as well, but I prefer to use the comb. That way everything can literally be slicked back. Once I smooth it backward and kind of draw it to the side, I use my finger to kind of create an indentation and then I'm going to pin it. That way it sets just like that. This is one of my tips for getting a super flat install and a super defined middle part. Whether I'm doing a widow's peak or not, I always make sure to use my green spritz and my little comb to smooth out the middle part. Also, when you do this on one side, make sure that you do the same exact thing on the other side. And always check that everything is even on both sides, especially when you're working with a widow's peak. I use the side that I already did and pinned, and I like it as a guide for the other side that I'm getting ready to pin. This way everything will stay balanced and even. Before I finalize the other side, I'm just going to go ahead and get those curls to be a little bit looser, making sure they match up with the other side, and then I'm going to pin it again with my duck clip. See how I'm not afraid to comb out the curls? This is because I allowed it to set and I know that the hair is well enough to hold the curls. After I'm done shaping everything, defining my part, and getting everything in place, I'm going to go in with my duck clips and clip everything exactly where I want it to lay. My main focus is going to make sure I have those bangs clipped perfectly to frame the face. And then we're going to go in to use another light holding spray. And I like to use Tresemme, but you can also use Got To Be since it isn't as strong as it used to be. And now it gives more of a soft, touchable hold. I also really like the Sebastian Shaper spray as well. We're going to use that spray to set our curls so that they last even after the client leaves the chair. And it's also going to help keep everything perfectly in place. Once I'm finally done and I'm satisfied with what I see, I just go in with a little bit more of the holding spray and I take my clips out. Like I said before, curling and combing everything out is all about preference and what you like. So just trust your eye and stop when you're happy with the look. And another tip, if you want extra volume, you can tease the roots or fluff it out with just your fingers in your hand. And remember, less is always more with product. You want the hair to still have some movement and still bounce when you're done. Make sure when you go to record your content, guys, you record in 4K 60 to get the best quality so that everything looks super clean and professional. I really hope that I was able to help you guys learn something new today and give you some tips that you can use in your own styling. Please, guys, stay tuned for more tutorials. I promise I'll be dropping new techniques and new ways to melt as I learn. And I'll also show you guys how I melt my 613 wigs, wand curls, and so much more. You do not want to miss it. And if you guys can, please take a moment to leave me a review or some feedback on the video. It really helps a lot and it means everything to me. I cannot wait to see y'all take off. I know y'all are going to kill it. If you invested in this video, I just want to let you know I'm proud of you for deciding to take that step to better your craft. That's it and that's all, and I will see you guys in the next video.